Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the St. Mark Spark. We are coming a little bit earlier today. Normally we debut at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but today we're doing this actually a little bit sooner because it's far too nice of a day to spend inside. So I thought let's go ahead and let's take care of it right now. Let's go ahead and start running with our Spark. Our beginning, what we're going to start with is a reminder we are reading through the four Gospels in 40 days. And so we have been doing that for the last 6 days. We're still in the middle part of Matthew. If you would like to walk alongside us, you are certainly encouraged and welcome to do so. It's about 2 to 3 chapters a day. And if we do that, we can complete and read through the four Gospels during the Lenten season, during these 40 days. So I encourage you to participate in that. I thought what we can do with the Spark is to focus a little bit on some of the passages that we read on that day or previous days, then also answer some of the questions that get brought up. So if you have a question, do not hesitate to leave a comment with that. Send me a Facebook message, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to walk alongside you. I'm more than happy to answer those questions as best I can. So to start right now, we're going to go to one of the great passages that we have in the Bible. It's the Beatitudes. It's Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. Now, there's been a lot of debate over whether or not we should have displays of the Ten Commandments and whether they should be in public spaces, schools or courthouses or public land. And the Ten Commandments are fine. They're fine. The first four are great. The next six are great. Talking about our relationship with God with the first four and the relationship with each other, the next six. These are important things. How much more would it be better to be having these things written not on public land, but written on our hearts with the Beatitudes? I think Matthew 5, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, is essential to who we are as people of God and people who want to follow the Christ. So I'm going to read that, then we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to answer a few questions as well. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain and he sat down. His disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." May this God's word speak to our hearts, our minds, our spirits. This is to God. So I think a lot about this. I think a lot about the Beatitudes. I think a lot about what it has to say in my life, lives as we seek to live lives that are holy. And what Jesus is doing here, and all these things, in many ways, the world would put these things down. The world would not value these things. In fact, the world would step on people who would exhibit these things. What can the meek expect to inherit? What can those who are broken or poor in spirit expect to gain? But this is the divine reversal that is symbolized in the incarnation, symbolized the divine reversal that Jesus was not born in a palace, but Jesus was born in a lowly stable, that Jesus was not born with a crown. The only crown Jesus would ever wear would be a crown of thorns. It is a divine reversal of, we see the way the world's kingdoms work, the way the world's power works, but the reversal we see throughout all of the Gospels is the reversal of saying those who are low will be raised up, and those who are high will be brought down. This is at the core of what the Beatitudes speak to. And maybe we've heard this version of the Beatitudes through the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible or the NIV version of the Bible. I'm going to read it a little bit differently to you today, a second time from a different version. This is from The Message by Eugene Peterson. This is the Bible in contemporary language. The word, but I think there's a power in this as well. When Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds, he climbed a hillside. Those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, well, they climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions. This is what he said. You are blessed when you are at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and God's rule. You are blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. You are blessed when you're content with just who you are. No more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. You're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink in the best meal you'll ever eat. You are blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, you find yourself cared for. You're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind, your heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. You're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you deeper into God's kingdom. Not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort, and they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give a cheer even. For though they don't like it, I do. And all heaven applauds. And know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have gotten into this kind of trouble. May this God's word speak to our hearts, our minds, our spirits. This too is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We have in these dueling versions of the Beatitudes a beautiful reminder. The first one from the NRSV is pretty straightforward. The second one that we hear from Eugene Peterson's The Message, it sounds different, but there's kind of a beauty to that as well, of saying that when you're at the end of your rope, and how many of us during this time of COVID, during the cold outside, have felt at the end of our rope. Jesus says, when there's less of you, there's more of God in his rule. When there's less opportunity for God to be in control. And the second part, you're blessed when you feel like you've lost the things most dear to you. When you feel like you've lost everything, those things that are dear to you, when you have to open your hands and let go, it is then that you can feel yourself embraced by the one most dear to you. You're blessed when you're content with who you are. With who you are. When you're content. When there's no more, no less. When you find yourself content with who you are, you find yourselves proud owners of everything that cannot be bought. People who buy clothes or buy homes or buy cars or do these things to try to get a claim from other people, to try to fill a void in themselves. When you feel content with yourselves, you will find yourself owning things that cannot be bought. You're blessed when you work up a good appetite for God, when you hunger and you thirst for righteousness. Because when you do, you will receive the best meal you've ever tasted. Put another way, when your deepest longing, your deepest hunger is for God, God will satisfy that hunger. God does not give us a desire for God that God does not meet. God does not give us, we're told, a desire for food. Since we desire food, there's a thing called bread. And we desire drink, there's a thing called water. Yet while we desire God, God will be there and God will feed us. You're blessed when you care. In this world right now, it feels like fewer and fewer people care. When you are full of care, when you are careful, then you're going to find yourselves cared for. When you are full of care for others, then you're going to find yourselves cared for. You're blessed when your inside world, when your mind, your heart, when those things are put right. When you are right with yourself, then you can start being right with the world. Then you can start seeing the world with God-shaped eyes, with a God-shaped heart, the eyes of our hearts. You're blessed when you show people how to cooperate instead of compete. When you show people how to cooperate instead of fight. When you discover who you really are, you're part of God's family. Not something that seeks to one up someone else or to strike someone else or to take from someone else. When you teach people to be peacemakers, then you start seeing the kingdom all around you. You're blessed even when your commitment provokes persecution. When being true to Jesus and following that path, when it drives persecution, because it drives us deeper into God's kingdom. And then the last part is saying, basically, and we hear in the passage where Jesus gets really personal, he says, you're going to deal with, are going to deal with people speaking all kinds of ill to you on Jesus' behalf. And Jesus says, don't go be down about that. Rejoice in that. Be glad. Your reward is great in heaven. Sing with the angels because the angels are singing with you. There's so much richness right here in the Beatitudes. There's so much richness here in the Sermon on the Mount. There are a lot of questions that I did receive regarding the first part of Matthew. Several questions from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. There's a lot of times where Jesus says things like, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Or be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And we start thinking like, well, I can't do that. You know, scribes and the Pharisees were the ones, the most religious folks. These were the law-abiding folks. These were the people who even created, they followed all the laws, and they even made up some more to follow. So when Jesus says that if your righteousness doesn't surpass theirs, you're not going to the kingdom of heaven, that sounds troubling to us. That sounds like if my works can't get me there, if my righteousness can't get me there, then what's it going to be? Well, put around another way is to say that we can't do it on our own. We can't do it on our own. You know, we hear folks will say, well, you get to heaven because you're a good person. The scripture tells us no one is good. Nobody has a righteousness of their own. But because of God's love, because of God's righteousness, because of that, that is what opens up the kingdom of heaven to us. So the whole point is Jesus is saying, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, you're not going to heaven. Well, the point Jesus is saying is that nobody is going to heaven. So does that mean we're not supposed to be righteous? Of course not. We're supposed to still strive to do that, but not to get the keys to the kingdom. We do that because God has already said yes to us. We do these things not out of begrudging obligation. We do this out of joyful response and obedience. Next, Jesus talks about some things that are really hard to discuss. I mean, in the church, and frankly, it's hard to discuss among families. It talks about reinterpreting the law. You know, the saying about you shall not commit adultery or you shall not murder. And sometimes we could say, well, I've never cheated on my spouse, so I'm good there. Or I've never killed anybody, I'm good there. Well, Jesus doesn't eliminate those things, but he expands on them. And when he expands on them, it means more of a conviction for our lives and our hearts. Frankly, he says, you've heard say don't commit adultery, but he says if you look at someone at someone else with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. You're already guilty of this. There's an old famous Jimmy Carter interview from the 1970s where he talked about having the sin of lust in his heart, and people kind of made fun of him for that. But Jimmy Carter was specifically referencing this passage of saying that we've all had lust in our heart. Now, it can be physical lust, but it can be lust for money. It can be lust for acclaim or lust for any number of things. But the whole point is, Jesus says, none of you are righteous by these standards. And we say, well, I've never murdered anybody. I've never killed anybody. I'm a pretty good person. But Jesus says, you've heard it say, do not murder. But I say to you, anybody who speaks ill of someone else, anybody who calls their brother or sister Raka, which is translated as blockhead, which is literally a comic book, a Peanuts, a Charlie Brown insult. Calling somebody a blockhead is guilty to the fires of hell. It's like, I've never murdered anybody, but I've both thought and said these kinds of things. Again, the whole point of this is to say that none of us are righteous. We can't do it on our own. And if we are self-righteous, then we will never let in the righteousness of God and Jesus Christ in our life. And the last question I had received was a question about divorce. And the church has a tricky relationship with divorce. There was a church in Joplin that I knew plenty of people who used to go to church there until they got divorced. And then there was a shunning of people. There was a blame game. And some people gave up on church completely. And some people simply went to other congregations and looked for a safe spot. Divorce is a reality. Divorce happens. I've heard it said before, a divorce occurs when there wasn't a marriage in the first place. And I do believe a divorce is sin, but it's not an unforgivable sin. And we talked about all these other sins that Jesus has mentioned. Divorce is a thing, it ultimately comes down to breaking a vow or breaking a promise, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of what God calls us to be. It doesn't automatically separate us from God's love. What Jesus is talking about here, it says, in your law, a man can simply present to his wife a certificate of divorce and say, we're done. He could give her a piece of paper and then walk away and leave her destitute. The woman in this case had no power, had no control, had no agency. And Jesus was challenging that. Jesus was condemning that and saying that that's not the way it is to be. Again, this is about that reversal. If you look at the way the world is operating, it's not godly. And Jesus is talking about how do we change that? How do we alter that? It's funny, sometimes we have more grace for people we don't know than people with whom we live. That church in Joplin that shunned so many people in their church who had gotten divorced had a sign out in front of their church that said, the advertised divorce recovery. And I thought, what a shame that is that we don't care for those people who are broken and who are suffering and hurting inside the congregation, but we're going to use this as a tool to try to bring in other people and advertise it. The whole point is to acknowledge broken relationships harm us, and they cause God harm from time to time. But what we have to see is that God wants fullness and abundance in our life. And where marriages can be saved, of course, God wants that to happen. But there are also marriages where there is abuse, where there is infidelity, where there is harm. And God does not want us to stay in these places. God wants us not just to suffer needlessly. It's one thing to suffer for the gospel, as we hear in the beginning of Matthew and the Beatitudes right here. But not all suffering is redemptive. In suffering in a marriage, if there is no hope for reconciliation and restoration, that does not bring God any glory, any honor. I know several people who have been married their whole lives, but they've been divorced for years because they stopped loving each other, they stopped honoring each other, they stopped caring for one another. There's so many good and wonderful things that are here read through Matthew's gospel. There's so many great things that we're going to be talking about moving forward as we journey through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I encourage the questions to keep coming. I encourage you all to please share your thoughts with me, and I'll be happy to do my best to be in a conversation with you through these sparks. I pray that God be with you. I pray that you would see yourself as blessed and see yourself as knowing that God is with you. We are blessed because God is here. And may pray that you would be a blessing to someone else this day. May God be with you all.